Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Student Loan Debt Informational webinar. So if you are looking for information regarding student loans, you are in the right place. My name is Samantha Sang, and I'm the Legislative Director and Policy Advisor at NextGen Policy. Today's webinar is brought to you by Senator Scott Wiener, representing Senate District 11, the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, otherwise commonly known as DFPI, and the Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights Coalition. So to get us started off today, we're so appreciative and excited to have Senator Scott Wiener himself with us. And we thank him for putting on this timely webinar. We know that right now, so many of us with student loans have a lot of questions. So it's my honor to start by introducing Senator Scott Wiener. The senator was elected in November of 2016 and re-elected in 2020 to represent District 11 in the California State Senate. And District 11 includes all of San Francisco, Broadmoor, Colma, and Daly City, as well as portions of South San Francisco. In the state Senate, Senator Wiener has a proven track record on working tirelessly on many critical issues impacting District 11 and the state, such as making housing more affordable, strengthening and expanding public transportation systems, increasing access to healthcare, including mental health and addiction treatment, and being a leader in the fight to combat climate change and safeguard and expand the rights of all communities, including immigrants and the LGBTQ community, just to name a few. Senator Wiener has authored 70 bills that have been signed into law. Many are noteworthy and first in the nation, such as SB 253, first in the nation climate law that requires corporations to disclose their greenhouse gas emissions. And the senator has been recognized by respected community organizations for his work. Again, numerous to highlight and worthy of mentioning, but we'll just mention the Larkin Street Youth Services, who honored Senator Wiener for his work to combat youth homelessness in California. Senator Wiener has served as chair and as a member of many key legislative committees, such as chairing the Senate Budget and Senate Housing Committees. He serves as co-chair of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus and chair of the Senate Mental Health Caucus. He is the past chair of the California Legislative LGBTQ Caucus and serves on the Governor's Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. Senator Wiener grew up in New Jersey, the son of a small business owner and a teacher, and attended public school. He received a bachelor's degree from Duke University and a law degree from Harvard Law School, and has spent a year in Chile on a Fulbright scholarship doing historical research. He has lived in San Francisco's Castro neighborhood since 1997. And with that, we are so honored to have a wonderful state leader with us today. Senator Wiener, do we have you on the line?
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for doing this workshop for folks. I know it's a very stressful time for a lot of reasons with the incoming administration and just all of the challenges we've had around student loan debt relief. I know a lot of people, it's like a roller coaster for people, and I want to really acknowledge President Biden for trying repeatedly to try to give people relief from student loans, and unfortunately, the Republicans and then the courts, really upended those approaches, and we should not expect much help from the incoming presidential administration. But with that said, there are obviously tools that people can use, and there are programs that can help people, not as much as we would like, but they are there. And so I'm just super grateful to NextGen and to everyone who's making today possible. We have to, as a state, as a country, we make it very hard for young people. Student loans is one aspect. The cost of housing is another, and we are just increasingly making it difficult for young people just to get a foothold financially and otherwise to be able to chart a positive path for the future, career-wise, starting a family, doing all the things that, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you should be doing and thinking about. And so we need to do more to help young people get that foothold and helping people navigate their options for student loan repayment. And then I hope in the future, being able to revisit once we have a different federal administration, being able to revisit student loan forgiveness because it's gotten out of control and we need some real reform. So again, thank you so much and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. Thank you for those words of encouragement. We know it's definitely appreciated right now. And thank you for your support for student loan borrowers and getting this important information out to all Californians. All right. So with that, everyone, we'll just start with some important information about today's webinar. Please note that this is being recorded. So we will be sending the recording out to everyone who registered after today. And so that we can get through as much of the information in today's webinar, audience members' microphone and videos are muted, but the Q&A box should be at the bottom of your screens and is available to you to drop in any of your questions there. And please note that we will have a live Q&A questions and answer section at the end of today's webinar. And we know that, like the senator mentioned, there's been a lot of updates and news about student loans recently and in the news. So please note that all of the information in today's webinar is accurate and up to date as of this moment. So hopefully not a lot of changes right after today, but that can always happen. And so right now, this is information that you can count on. All right. And then moving on, as you heard from the senator, you'll also be hearing from our DFPI in just a moment. And today's webinar is also brought to you by the Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights Coalition. We're a statewide diverse coalition working to support borrowers throughout the state, no matter what stage of their student loan journey. And my organization, NextGen, along with the Student Borrower Protection Center, Student Debt Crisis Center, Consumer Reports, and Young Invincibles all co-lead this coalition. And so later today, you'll also be hearing from Sabrina from Student Debt Crisis Center as well. And with that, I'll hand it off to Selena, our very own California Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson at DFPI. Selena?
Thank you, Sam.
All right.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Selena Damian, and as Sam mentioned, I am the ombudsperson here in the DFPI, within the DFPI, but I am the ombudsperson here in California. Just briefly about the DFPI, we are California's consumer protection agency, and we regulate companies of financial products to ensure their compliance. And this includes student loan servicers. So this is going to include your federal student loan servicers. Within the department, we have a consumer protection program, and then I fall under that program, and I work directly with borrowers. I help them understand their options. I help them understand their loans and really help guide them. I help analyze complaints that come in so borrowers can file complaints against their student loan servicers in addition to filing with the Department of Education. We also take enforcement and legal actions when companies are not in compliance. And I think this is really important to understand. As the senator said, we do have a changing administration, and we really want to use our state authorities to help borrowers and to really do the job of regulating these student loan servicers as much as we can. So we really need to hear from borrowers. We want to not only help them resolve their issues, but we want to hear what's going on, because it's the only way that DFPI will be able to take action and hold these servicers accountable. And then part of the work that we do is we conduct education and outreach to enhance consumer awareness and protect consumers from fraud and abuse. Next, please. So today we will be talking about doing a brief overview about of student loans. We'll be talking about loan types, servicers, repayment plans, and then we will be giving some updates on what's going on with debt relief, and then we'll be providing resources at the end. As Sam mentioned, this information is accurate as of today. things are ever changing, so it's really important that you know your resources, keep in touch with your servicers, and all your address information should be updated with studentaid.gov and the servicer. And just as a reminder, we are not financial counselors or attorneys, and we are advocates and experts here to assist you. Please, in the Q&A, if it's a question that's very personal or in-depth and complex and we don't get to it, we will be providing our contact information at the end as well, so you can reach out to us. Next, please. To get started, how much student loan debt do we have in California? We have 4 million borrowers that owe approximately $141 billion of student loan debt. The majority of that is federal student loan debt. The average debt load of a California borrower is $37,000, and the majority of that debt is held by borrowers between the ages of 35 to 49 years of age. The default rate in California is 7%, and a report came out recently that showed that the default rate is twice as high for borrowers that attend for-profit colleges or universities. Between 1995 and 2017, the balance of the total federal student loan debt increased more than sevenfold. And in the United States, borrowers owe a total of $1.78 trillion of student loan debt. Next, please. And what's important to note about this debt is that there are disproportionate debt burdens held by women, low-income borrowers, and borrowers of color. So that could be for a number of reasons. It could be the rising cost of tuition and fees at public colleges and universities, the racial wage gap, which results in less family support for incoming students. Historically, we've had many predatory institutions and practices. And then once a borrower does graduate or student graduates and goes into the workforce, the gender and racial pay gap. A borrower in a 75% minority neighborhood is 5 times more likely to fall behind on their student loan payments. Women hold nearly 2/3 of the national student debt, and Black women have the highest rates of default. Next, please. What we are also seeing now is that older Americans are also burdened by student loan debt. So although we think of student loan debt and we think that this may be a problem just for younger adults or borrower students just exiting college, this is actually we're seeing now, these numbers were just released in December of 2023 from Department of Education, that borrowers over the age of 50 owe a cumulative $400 billion in federal student loan debt. And as you can see the breakdown here, and basically what we're seeing is that borrowers, that the older they get, that the higher risk of default, they have higher risks of default. Most of this debt is held for their own education, and they've held this debt for, in many cases, at least 15 years. So this is debt that they've had for many years. Many times this isn't just that they haven't made payments. It's just the way that interest accumulates and many of the factors that we're seeing with servicers and mismanagement of loans. Next, please. To try to mitigate some of the debt and to support and help borrowers in California, we do have Assembly Bill 376, or the California Student Bill of Rights. This is an additional protection from the Higher Education Act, which are your federal rights as a student loan borrower. So when you sign your promissory notes, when you do your exit counseling, you receive information about those rights. But in California, as a borrower, you do have this additional protection, and it's very important for borrowers to know, right? I talked about filing complaints, and basically these are the things that you can file complaints about, right? These are the issues. And it applies to servicers in California with not just federal loans, but also private loans. So if you're a borrower and you're seeing any of these issues, you're having problems, you can file a complaint. So what this does is it prohibits servicers from engaging in abusive, unfair, or deceptive practices, and it requires that they work in the best financial interest of borrowers. Servicers must provide borrowers with information and applications for income-driven repayment plans and other forms for federal benefits and protection. So this is really important right now. We know that there's a lot of borrowers are having a lot of issues with servicers. I hear every day from borrowers. So it's really important that they know that servicers should be timely processing paperwork, processing payments on time. They should be maintaining accurate records. And as I said, providing accurate information for IDR plans and PSLF applications and any other federal benefit or protection. It establishes special protections for military borrowers, those working in public service, older borrowers, and borrowers with disabilities. So they have to provide specialized training to their staff. And then it protects borrowers from any negative consequences stemming from a sale, assignment, transfer, or system conversion. This is really important. We have seen millions of accounts transferred. We have seen platform changes. Many servicers have updated their systems. So we want to ensure that borrowers do not incur any negative consequences as a result of that they're maintaining proper records, proper accounting, and to be able to provide that information to borrowers. You, as a borrower, do have the right to request your account, any history, your promissory note, and they should be able to provide that information. That's called a qualifying request or qualified written request. And then this law also gives the borrower the right to take legal action against their servicer if they fail to comply with any of these laws, and this is a private right of action. So that's very important. And as I said, this law applies to borrowers with federal and private loans. And I believe I am passing it back over to Sam.
Yes, thank you, Selena, for sharing that information about what student debt looks like in California and what rights everyone here today has in our state. So next, I'll be going over the different types of student loans there are, as well as servicers, just to make sure that everyone can be sure to understand, the basics of your student loans situation. And so as a student loan borrower, you may be carrying either federal student loans or private student loans. And please note that it's common to have a mix of both federal and private loans. So this is hopefully an easy visual for you all. Most of the information that we'll be covering today is relevant to federal student loans, as private student loans, unfortunately, aren't eligible or covered by many of the federal or by any of the federal repayment plans and other programs. So under the federal loan, a student loan bucket, there are also different types of federal loans there that you can see here. There are direct loans, which is probably the majority of most recent students will be under. There are Perkins loans and FFEL loans, or federal family education loans. Those two programs, Perkins and FFEL loans, are a bit older programs, so those are not currently enrolling any new borrowers, and those have been discontinued. But certainly some borrowers are still holding those loans and are still paying them off. And so if you do have a direct student loan, you may also have one of these different types under that program: the direct subsidized loan, unsubsidized loan, direct graduate plus, parent plus, and consolidation. These loans all have different terms, such as direct subsidized loans do not start getting that charged interest while you're enrolled in school or doing your 6-month grace period, while the direct unsubsidized loans does start accumulating interest from the date of the first loan disbursement. And then same for ELP loans. You have several different types under that program: subsidized, unsubsidized, Stafford, and so forth, that you can see here. So let's go into the different types of loan servicers. So a student loan servicer is a company that is what it sounds like. It's supposed to be an entity that is servicing your loan, right? So like you heard from Selena, taking your payments, applying it to your account, processing any paperwork related to your loan account, and all those other services. The federal government, as you know and you've heard already, holds many student loan accounts. And so the Department of Education contracts with loan servicers to handle all of those accounts. And so hopefully this visual here will help you identify and help you clue in if you have a federal student loan or a private student loan, because depending on your servicer that you might recognize their logo here, right? So if you have Mohila, higher chances that you probably hold a federal student loan. But if you're getting, paperwork and contacting, Discover, for example, you would probably have a private student loan. And please note that for private student loan servicers, they may not necessarily be lenders. They can just be the servicer that is contracted by a private lender to service your loan. And besides this list too, we're also going to get into, another way you can tell, making sure that you have a federal student loan or a private student loan. One of the easiest ways to see the difference is if your loan shows up on your studentaid.gov account, that is most likely all federal loans. So let's get into studentaid.gov. So this is your go-to website. You'll hear this over and over again. This is where you want to start off with to make sure that you are getting the complete picture about your student loan account. And so make sure that when you are going to this website, it is an official government website, owned by Department of Education, that you type it in exactly that you see here at the bottom of your screen. If you just Google studentaid.gov, you will sometimes see other websites that are not official government related websites. So just be very careful there that you're logging into the right website here. And on this account, you will get to see, all the details of your federal student loans. And there's been updates to the website, so hopefully understanding it will be much more easier with the updated dashboards that they have. So logging in, when you try to access your studentaid.gov account, this is what the login page looks like. If you don't have an account yet, you can see at the bottom of the screen here, the link there to create an account. And then if you're having any issues with logging into your account, maybe it's been a while, or resetting your password, please call this number that you see on the screen, 1-800-433-3243, and Department of Education staff can help you regain access to your account. All right, and so we're going to go over some of the highlights of what the dashboard looks like on studentaid.gov. So this is just one example. At the top right, you see this little red box that we have highlighted for you. Make sure it's your account. And as you heard Selena mention, make sure that you go in there and that you have all of your contact information up to date. Mailing address, email address, phone number, so that you're getting those timely notices from the Department of Education when you need them. Staying on the right side of the screen here, if you go down to the bottom, you'll see another little red box that we've highlighted for you. These red boxes are not on the website, but under the My Loan Servicer section, that's where you'll get to see a list of all your federal loan servicers. And so for example here, this borrower only has one federal loan servicer, which is Mohila. There's also a link provided so that you can get to the Mohila website or your servicer website, and you can get information there as well, set up an online account with them, all of these places again to get more information about your student loans. So again, if your servicer doesn't show up here, so for example, maybe you've been, communicating with Wells Fargo and you have paperwork about a loan with a student loan with Wells Fargo, and they're not showing up here, again, high tell sign that they are a private student loan servicer, and so they would not show up here. And then we want to go over quickly the details section of your student aid account. So sorry, if we go back, there's under your My Aid section there, yes, with the cursor is the View Details button. So you'll want to go ahead and click on that. And now we can go on to the next page. You will see a summary of your student loan accounts. So this is what you should see once you click View Details. First and foremost, there's a section that summarizes the total amount of federal loans you have, the total numbers, your servicers, and the total broken down by your outstanding balance, your principal, and interest. And then if you scroll down from that summary, you'll eventually get to a section that says loan types. And so we've pulled that here for you. That will provide you details about the different federal loan types and your balance for each of those loans. So if you remember in the earlier slide, this example shows that this borrower has 11 federal loans, and it looks like it's a mix of loans under the direct loan program and the Perkins loan program. So again, you do want to make sure you're well familiar with, able to access your studentaid.gov account. That is the first place you should go to make sure you see where all your information's at, and make sure that's all up to date. And so with that, I think we're going to go next to debt relief options. The next slide. And with that, I will pass it off to Sabrina to walk through this.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Calazans. I'm the Managing Director at the Student Debt Crisis Center. We're going to jump right into student loan repayment options, but I also do want to encourage you that as we're covering all of this information, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A. So let's take a look at what options we have here. All right. So it looks like there is this California Repayment Assistance Programs option available to folks. So let's go through that really quick. We have the Stephen M. Thompson Physician Core Loan Repayment Program. Actually, I'm gonna see, Sam, are we on the right slide? I just want to make sure that we're covering the right thing. We might be. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look at the repayment plans here. Kimberly, if we can jump to the standard plan slide, I think it's right before this. Perfect, we can start there. Okay, great. So we have a 10-year standard repayment plan. This is the plan that folks are going to be placed in when you're first entering into repayment, or when you first after your grace period, you're kicking things off. So this 10-year standard repayment plan, borrowers are initially placed in this, and you're going to have fixed monthly payments over a course of 10 years. So your payment is not going to change over the course of the 10 years. It's always going to be the same. However, we know that for some folks, this is an unaffordable option. So there are alternatives. The monthly payment is going to be based on your loan balance amount. But again, as I said, this is unaffordable for a lot of folks. So then that's when we have alternative options available. Let's go to the next slide. And then this is when you're going to need to take action. So before we get into the specifics and the options available, there are income-driven repayment plans. These plans are going to be based on your family size and your income. So these payments can often be more affordable. They're calculated as a percentage of discretionary income based on the income and family size, not the loan amount. That's another pro here. They help folks with lower incomes, especially those who may have lost a job or who have decreased incomes. So if you're not working and you're making $0, your monthly payment should reflect that and should also be $0. If you're working less if you're a seasonal worker and you're working less at one point in the year, you might want to recertify your family size and your income information at that point to lock in a lower monthly payment. Anytime that your family size or your income changes, you can recertify your income so that your monthly payment is reflective of that change. Another benefit to income-driven repayment plans are that it helps to prevent delinquency and default. We're going to talk about that shortly. And every time you recertify your income and family size, you're going to lock in that lower monthly payment for a year. So if you are currently making $0 now and you recertify and you lock in a $0 payment, even if you start working again next month, you're still going to be on a $0 monthly payment for the next 12 months. So that's how that works. Now, a downside of the IDR plans in comparison to the standard plan is that it does extend the loan repayment period to 20 to 25 years. So again, the standard plan is over the span of 10 years, and the IDR plans are going to be based on 20 to 25 years of repayment. And we're going to get to a slide shortly that's going to break down whether or not you're going to be in 20 or 25 years of repayment. All right, so looking at this chart, again, this is just another visual. I know some folks are visual learners. So, all right, these are the IDR plans on the right-hand side, the standard plan in the middle, and then these alternative plans. These alternative plans we're not really going to get into today. These do not fall under the umbrella of income-driven repayment plans. These tend to be over the span of a long period of time, like 25 years as well. However, it could be that the payment goes up over time. Every year the payment increases. So if you're interested in that, you can go to studentaid.gov and just take a look and find out more about that. The standard plan, as I said, everyone is automatically placed into it. And then if you want to get into an income-driven repayment plan, you would have to go ahead and apply for it. So what are the options here? Looking at the IDR plans, there is the SAVE plan, the IBR plan, which stands for income-based repayment. There's PAY, which is pay as you earn, and there's ICR, which is income contingent repayment. I know a lot of folks have been following along, but I just want to clarify what's going on. There's a lot of confusion with all of the income-driven repayment plans. We're going to talk shortly about the litigation and the lawsuits that have blocked the SAVE plan. IBR, income-based repayment, is still an existing plan, and then PAY and ICR I'm going to cover right now. But let's look at this chart here that's essentially going to break down each of the plans and the benefits of each one. So looking at SAVE is going to be calculated based on 5% of your income if you only have undergraduate loans. And if you have a mixture of undergrad and grad loans, it's supposed to take a weighted average between that 5 and 10% of your income. If you have just undergrad loans, it'll be 20 years of repayment. If you have any grad loans, it'll be 25 years. For IBR, if you borrowed after July 1st, 2014, it'll look at 10% of your monthly amount over 20 years. If before July 1st, 2014, you borrowed and were enrolled in IBR, it's 15% over 25 years. For ICR, income contingent repayment, this is 20% of your income, over the span of 25 years. And for pay as you earn, it's 10% over 20 years. Now, because of this litigation with the SAVE plan, folks have really limited options right now as to what plans you can enroll in. So you can apply right now for the SAVE plan. That is an option for folks that aren't in it. However, it has been stopped, and the plan is not in effect. It's essentially been paused, and we're going to talk about that forbearance shortly. If we can go back to the previous slide, please. For IBR, that is an option. That's the only alternative option right now that folks can apply for. However, there is a debt to income ratio financial hardship piece that you have to display. So not everyone, unfortunately, qualifies for IBR. Now, ICR, income contingent repayment, is the only option available for Parent Plus loans. So if you have a Parent Plus loan and you consolidate it, you can still enroll that loan into ICR right now, but any other loans cannot. And no one at this point can get enrolled into pay as you earn. What we do know from the Department of Education is that ICR and pay are anticipated to come back online for all folks sometime in mid to late December. As we have more information on that, we will be sure to share it with you. But as of right now, those options are just not available to everyone. Next slide, please. Okay. One thing that's important for us to note is what happens if you don't make a payment. So in the past, this past year, there was this protective on-ramp period where if you did not make a payment, you were safe. There was no consequence such as risk of delinquency in default. But that period came to an end on September 30th of this year. So now if folks miss a payment, there is going to be a risk of delinquency in default. So what does that mean? So delinquency is the first day after a payment is missed. So the day after you miss your payment, automatically your loan is in delinquency. If you continue to not make your payment during that time, you will be reported to credit bureaus after 90 days of non-payment. Now, if you continue to not make payments up to 270 days, you are then considered to be in default. Now, both of these can definitely have negative consequences. Delinquency is the first stage, but default is where it gets a lot scarier. The consequences of default include tax refunds being withheld, wage and Social Security garnishments, no access to additional federal aid, and other things. And so, if you're currently in default and you weren't able to take advantage of Fresh Start, which was a program to get out of default, you can do so by one of two ways. The first, there is loan rehabilitation. This is when you're going to work with your student loan servicer or holder, and you are going to essentially agree in writing to make 9 voluntary, reasonable, and affordable monthly payments as determined by the loan servicer within 20 days of the due date. And you're going to make all of those payments during a period of 10 consecutive months. So that is an agreement that you're going to make. It is a complex process, but if you're wanting to get out of default, it's worth attempting. However, the more simple way to get out of default is to take advantage of consolidation. So if you haven't consolidated your loans or you have an outstanding loan that can be consolidated with the rest of them, you can apply to consolidate the loan and essentially create a new loan, bringing them out of default and then enroll them into an IDR plan to ensure that you secure a lower monthly payment. So there are options to get out of default, but the goal is to not get into default in the first place to prevent any negative consequences. Next slide. All right, the SAVE plan. I think this is a big topic for a lot of people, so let's talk about what's going on. Okay. As I said, there are current lawsuits against the SAVE plan and there are impacts on borrowers. So if you've been following along, you may have heard there are about 18 state attorneys general being led by Missouri and Kansas who have sued to block the SAVE plan. The cases are ongoing, but because of a recent court order, this is preventing the Department of Education from actually offering the SAVE plan while this litigation continues. Now, because of that, anyone who is enrolled in the SAVE plan has been placed into the SAVE forbearance because the servicers are unable to properly bill folks at this time. So if you are enrolled in SAVE successfully or applied before, you should be enrolled in the SAVE forbearance and no payments are required at this time. And while you're in this forbearance, interest will not be accruing. I do want to flag that this week we have heard from folks, and I've received it personally since I do have student loans and I have Mohila as my servicer, that Mohila sent out an email to tons of borrowers, essentially saying that while you're in a period of forbearance, you accrue interest. Now, that is true that if you're in a regular forbearance, you accrue interest. However, if you are in the SAVE forbearance, you are not accruing interest. So Mohila's email that went out to millions of folks is just another example of miscommunication, misinformation, and just causing general confusion and chaos. So do not panic if you receive that email, excuse me, from Mohila and it just didn't make any sense to you. Now, online and paper applications to enroll in either SAVE or another IDR plan are available to borrowers. However, if you're currently in the SAVE plan, I'm going to talk about this shortly again, but if you're in the SAVE plan or in any plan and you want to enroll in another one and get out of the current plan, you can choose to do so. However, servicers are not actually processing applications. They're accepting them, but they're not processing them. So what happens is you are supposed to be placed into a 60-day period forbearance. And in that processing forbearance, you will receive an IDR credit and a PSLF credit. However, your interest will accrue. We're going to talk about this shortly. So if that's confusing, we're going to cover it again. Let's go to the next slide. So a lot of folks have reaching out and asking, should I apply for another IDR plan if you're currently in SAVE? So for the folks that we think should consider changing IDR plans, you should consider it if you want to continue receiving and working towards PSLF and IDR credits and are close to reaching the threshold. So if you are at 119 credits out of the 120 needed towards PSLF, while you're in that saved forbearance, you are not accruing PSLF credits. If you choose to get into IBR, you are able to, and you can then get into that processing forbearance. Once you're in IBR, you can then make additional payments towards PSLF to get to that 120 and get you to that threshold. While you're in the SAVE plan, you're not getting those credits. Not all borrowers are eligible for all IDR plans. Just one thing to consider as you're thinking about getting in and out of plans. And then things are changing by the day. So please refer to studentaid.gov for the most up-to-date information. As Sam said at the top of the hour, the information we're providing you today is accurate as of right now, but things are subject to change. And you may want to consider sticking with the SAVE plan if you don't mind not receiving those PSLF or IDR credits. There is a risky process called the buyback process that folks can try and take advantage of. Once you believe you've hit the 120 credits, you can use this PSLF buyback program to try and buy back the months that you were in the safe forbearance to get you to the 120. However, there is no guarantee that will work. And then you should also consider sticking with SAVE if you would like to remain in an interest-free forbearance for the time being, or if you would benefit from not having to make a payment. So if right now not making a payment is the best thing for your financial situation, then you might want to consider sticking within SAVE and saving as much as you can in the meantime. Next slide. So if you're considering applying for an IDR plan, or you want to change your IDR plan, you can do so online or via the paper application. The online application, we're going to share out the resources with you all later, but you can also find it at studentaid.gov. The paper forms can also be found at studentaid.gov, in which you can send the application either to your servicer via mail, or you can fill out the paper form, then re-upload it to your servicer's website. So there are multiple ways for folks to take advantage of that. For an IDR application, I do want to flag, you will need to provide income documentation. So whether that's a recent tax return or transcript, a W-2, a pay stub, a bank statement, interest or dividend statement, you will need to provide that documentation. And I do want to flag that processing times for income-driven repayment plans, for consolidation, and just in general have been extremely delayed, and they can take a while to process. So if that is taking a while, just know that it's happening for a lot of folks. And again, as I said before, if you're swapping from one plan to another, you should be placed into a processing forbearance for 60 days. If not, you can call your servicer and request to be placed into that processing forbearance. Next slide. Again, just a reminder of the information you should have on hand with you when applying for an IDR plan. You should have your permanent and or mailing address, family size information, employment information and employer address, income documentation, again, W-2, pay stub, employer letter, bank account statement, interest or dividend statement. And again, even if you've opted into IRS integration on studentaid.gov so that the Department of Ed and the IRS can essentially communicate with one another about your financial information, folks are still being required at this time to provide additional financial and income documentation. So please be sure to have that information on hand. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete the application. Next slide. All right, I believe I'm kicking it over to Sam.
Yes, thank you for that great breakdown about the SAVE program, Sabrina. I know we're getting a lot of questions on that, so hopefully we'll get to the Q&A here. So now we're getting into the pathways for debt relief. Just wanted to start off on this slide by saying that though we know things may be changing with the incoming president, we wanted to highlight that under President Biden and thanks to the reforms under his administration, borrowers were finally seeing the debt relief that they were promised and earned. And so certainly we hope that these programs will continue, and we encourage everyone to let your elected officials know if these programs are important to you. So highlighting here that under President Biden, nearly 5 million Americans saw a total of $175 billion in debt relief. So these programs can work. Public Service Loan Forgiveness, or PSLF, has been a major debt relief program for many, which we'll get into in the next section here very shortly. But that program had lots of issues, but saw a lot of reforms under President Biden. And when we saw it starting to work, we eventually saw a $74 billion in loan debt forgiven to more than 1 million public service workers. For 1.4 million borrowers, 56.5 billion in debt forgiveness was made by meeting the requirements of income-driven repayment plans. For 1.6 million borrowers who were cheated by schools that were proven to be providing poor quality education and basically defrauding students and were eventually closed down, saw 28.75 billion in debt relief. And finally, for more than 572,000 borrowers with total and permanent disability, saw 16.2 billion in debt relief. But let's go to specifically the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, or PSLF, one of the major debt forgiveness programs that you've been hearing a lot about, and we will try to get through as much of this as possible. So next slide, we'll go over first the criteria for, getting to this debt forgiveness. But it is a program that basically promised us that in exchange for about 10 years of public service, that any remaining student loan balance would be forgiven. And so public service jobs, right, include these crucial jobs and members of our community, like our teachers, firefighters, and healthcare workers at nonprofit hospitals. And so the program started in October 1st of 2007, but borrowers must take active steps to ensure that they receive the forgiveness that they're working towards. This includes making 120, qualifying monthly payments, which essentially equates to 10 years of payments, and then submit necessary paperwork and actually apply for PSLF. These payments do not need to be consecutive, just cumulative, meaning you can work, for example, in state government for 2 years, then go into the private sector for 1 year, then come back to public service for, another 8 years to reach that total of 10 years, or making those 120 payments while working in public service. And then after meeting those 120 payments, any of the remaining loan balance should be forgiven again. So if you're planning on PSLF, like I know many of my family and friends are, first, you should be thinking about, do you have a federal direct loan? Unfortunately, other types of federal loans do not qualify under this program. Then be sure to check if your employer counts as a qualifying employer under this program. That gets a little confusing, and we'll dig into that more in just a moment. And you also need to be making your student loan payments under a qualifying repayment plan. And again, we'll get to some more details about that next. But during your years of work in public service, you should be sure to document your employment using the PSLF form. Keeping this paperwork together and updated throughout the years will make the application process much easier when you're in that final year of service and about to apply. And just, again, make your application that much easier to submit. And we just wanted to go over next one way that you can maximize the benefits of federal student loan programs with PSLF. So, for example, income-driven repayment provides you with a potentially lower monthly bill depending on your income. For example, if you're currently at a lower income amount, your monthly bill could be as little as $0. And right, that $0 payment would count as an on-time payment. And then if you are actively working and planning to work, or are working in public service towards PSLF, right, to get that student loan forgiveness, these two programs basically would combine to make maximize the benefits to you by working in public service for 10 years, getting that debt relief, but while making those payments in an income-driven repayment plan would basically allow you to be paying as little each month as possible, while eventually planning to get that debt forgiveness. All right, next slide, please. And so what does qualify for public service loan forgiveness? So these are the loan types that you need to have in order to qualify for that debt to be forgiven. So it's these direct, subsidized, unsubsidized loans, direct graduate plus loans, direct consolidation loan, including one created with a parent plus loan if you consolidated that way. And then you need to have a qualifying employer. So not just working in public services will guarantee that you qualify. You need to make sure that you are working for the right employer. So all levels of government count, nonprofit organizations that have that 501c3 status and other critical public service careers do count. And an important note here that it does not matter your title while you're working for one of these qualified employers. It matters on who your employer is. So for example, if you are not a teacher, but you are working at a qualified public school, then you could still count under PSLF while you're working there. And then these are the two repayment plans that you must be enrolled in that does qualify for PSLF. All right, next slide. Just for further clarification about what does not qualify for PSLF. So unfortunately, many of these older loan programs that we've seen in the chat mentioned or the Q&A does not qualify for PSLF. But again, if you have those other direct loan programs, that they would. And then there are specifics about which employers do not qualify. For example, unfortunately, if you are employed by a labor union in the administrative kind of functions of that labor union, you will not qualify. Political nonprofit groups don't qualify. And then these other type of repayment plans don't. So alternative plans, unfortunately, if your loans are in deferment or forbearance, that is not, or in default for sure, you would not, that time for your loan would not qualify towards PSLF. All right. And so with that, next slide, I will pass it back off to Sabrina.
Thanks, Sam. All right, let's talk about Plan B, which is essentially following up from President Biden's original student debt cancellation plan. So if folks don't know, the president had originally proposed a couple years ago a plan that would cancel either $10,000 or $20,000 per borrower. But that was struck down by the Supreme Court. So then the president came back with an alternative plan, Plan B. And this plan essentially proposes benefits for borrowers who owe more than they originally borrowed, are eligible for loan forgiveness but are not enrolled in a program, who entered repayment 20 years or more and had undergraduate loans, who entered repayment 25 or more years ago with graduate loans, who enrolled in a low financial value program, or who are experiencing hardship paying back their loans. So it's clear that this plan is a little bit more targeted than the original plan. So this would be a smaller bucket of folks that would benefit from this. However, it would still be a great opportunity for a bunch of folks to get their debt canceled. However, let's take a look at the next slide here. There have been challenges again to debt relief. So I think there's a common theme here that when there are good things proposed, there have been a lot of opponents to debt cancellation, although there has also been a lot of folks in support of it. But looking at the challenges to debt relief, Plan B, the initial set of rules excluding the financial hardship, so that was a separate round, were set to be released and implemented this fall. But what we do know is that the Department of Education had sent guidance to loan servicers in preparation for this upcoming debt relief. And what happened was MOHELA, of course, who else, leaked this to the same attorneys general that sued against the original student debt cancellation plan. And because of that, a temporary restraining order was filed by these AGs, and that was issued for weeks. And so essentially, this is all still being held up in the court. The last court ruling essentially said that the Department of Education can still release the rules on debt cancellation through Plan B. However, that has not been released at this time. Since then, there has been another part of this Plan B released, which is the financial hardship portion. So let's take a look at that on the next slide. So for Plan B, which is the most recent rule released, or preliminary rule, excuse me, this could result in debt relief for up to 8 million folks. So 6 million would be eligible for automatic relief. 2 million would be eligible for relief by applying. So there was a comment period that ended this week, this Monday, on December 2nd. Comments are currently being reviewed by the Department of Education, and soon we anticipate Ed will release their rules. Once the rules are released, debt relief can be implemented, barring any legal challenges. However, as we've seen, there have been a lot of legal challenges, so we will keep an eye out to see if anything comes of it. But we know that there are a lot of folks who are experiencing financial hardship, and this could be really beneficial for those folks. Next slide. All right, with that, I'm going to toss it to Selena.
Thank you. Thank you. I just really briefly want to mention, we are seeing a lot of student loan scams going on. And so we really want borrowers to be aware. We know there is a lot of confusion. We know there's a lot of frustration and misinformation. So scammers are taking advantage of that. And many times these are what they are. It's their paper processing, relief agencies, and they don't work for Department of Education. They don't work for your servicers, and they promise loan forgiveness. They promise to help you. They promise to negotiate on your behalf. It's really important that you know who your student loan servicer is. Keep all your information updated on studentaid.gov. And if anyone reaches out to you via text, via email, via phone, because they do call many times a day and they do really use these pressure tactics, research the company, look up the name of the company, and they should say on their pages, yesterday I looked up a company, and it'll say at the bottom of the page, we are not affiliated with Department of Education or a servicer. So it's just really important that you know that there's nothing that a company can do for you that you can't do for yourself, whether it's consolidating, switching IDR plans. Again, we know the servicers are not reliable. It's really hard to get in touch with studentaid.gov, with Department of Education, but do not be harmed additionally by paying these companies, because they will sign you up for a contract, some type of subscription, and then we see borrowers have a really hard time getting out of those contracts. Next, please. And I just want to also mention, in addition to filing complaints with our agency, this is the Department of Education email. They do have an ombudsman's office, so they do also help borrowers with these issues. Again, things are slow there, so that's why we really recommend that you know your local resources. The CFPB is also a great way to file a great resource, and you want to file complaints with them as well. So we want your complaints heard through federal agencies and state agencies, because we know that there is a lot going on and that borrowers are having difficulties. Next, please. I know we've had a lot of questions about PSLF. I do want to, Sam, if you can point to that, where we're having a webinar on Monday that's going to be specifically on PSLF. So if you do have, it's going to be, Department of Education will be on hand also to answer questions. So just for borrowers, I know in the chat there was some mention, PSLF currently is not at any risk. We are still seeing forgiveness. We want borrowers just to understand there's different paths to forgiveness, whether IDR, PSLF, and the challenges right now, they are affecting PSLF and the IDR plans, but that program is still available for borrowers. So we do want borrowers, if you're a public employee, to really take advantage of the program. Sorry if I took, and then there's additional information on the screen as well. Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Selena. And we do recognize that we're coming up at the end of the session here today, but we did want to at least get to one question to answer live, and then we'll be going over some resources. Again, just want to mention that this will all be sent out to everyone who attended or registered, in case you need to jump off right now. But just really quickly, we saw a lot of questions coming in the Q&A box kind of around SAVE and the forbearances that are happening right now. So Judith and others have asked, kind of why are borrowers being put into an administrative forbearance right now? So we could just at least answer that pretty quickly here.
Yeah, I can jump in if that's helpful.
Yes.
All right, so there are essentially three forbearances that exist right now. I know it's a lot of information, but let's go through all of that. There is a regular forbearance that folks can apply for. This is just a regular forbearance, either a deferment or forbearance, but you need to apply for that. That is separate from what is going on with SAVE right now. So again, regular forbearance, you have to apply. If you were enrolled in SAVE prior to the litigation, or you applied for SAVE during the litigation, you should be in the SAVE forbearance, the SAVE administrative forbearance, to say that correctly. The SAVE administrative forbearance, there's about 8 million people enrolled in SAVE. Those folks were placed into this forbearance not by any choice of their own. You did not have to apply for it. The Department of Education put you into that forbearance. During this SAVE administrative forbearance, you are not accumulating PSLF or IDR credits, but your interest is not accruing at this time. Then there is a third forbearance, and that is called a processing forbearance. If you are looking to change from one repayment plan to another, because the loan servicers are not processing in applications, they are placing folks into a processing forbearance. You're placed into this forbearance as they are preparing to soon process the application. So it's a transition period before you're transferred from one repayment plan to another. I hope that explains it a little bit, but one you have to apply for, which is the regular forbearance. The SAVE administrative forbearance is for folks enrolled in SAVE, and then the processing forbearance is for anyone going from one repayment plan to another as you anticipate being switched over.
Perfect. Thank you, Sabrina. And we know that was a lot. So thanks for clarifying that pretty quickly here. And for everyone still here, let's actually go back a couple slides. We just wanted to highlight that, again, you will be having this information in your follow-up email. Let's keep going back to the FSA links. So we did compile some of the most common FSA links, federal links that will help you find information about your student loans. Again, that studentaid.gov is your go-to place, but there's places where you can get more information about SAVE, PSLF, IDR programs, and the Federal Student Loan Ombudsman contact here as well. So these will be sent to you. The next slide that you've already seen a bit has some more resources for you, specifically here in California. So again, DFPI. So happy to have Selena here. There's a lot of resources for Californians that you can find on the DFPI website. It just got revamped, like Selena mentioned, and see past recordings on their YouTube channel, that upcoming webinar as well. And then we definitely wanted to highlight the Student Loan Empowerment Network and the latest resource for Californians that DFPI is taking the charge on. This go to this link, sign up for one-on-one assistance if you really want to talk to a human being, right? And like figure out what's going on with your student loans. These folks are legal, some of them are lawyers, legal advisors, and whatnot that can really help you out with your student loan situation. So we do really encourage you to check out that website, sign up for an appointment, and really take a hold of what's going on with your student loans. All right. And with that, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Special thanks again to Senator Wiener and his staff for putting this on today, to Selena and DFPI for joining us and sharing this information, Sabrina for helping as well here from Student Debt Crisis Center. Thank you to our Next Gen Policy team members, Kimberly and Andrea, for working behind the scenes. And again, everyone, please watch your inboxes for the follow-up email with the webinar recording, including this all the links here that we've shared today. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.